how we can use strategy to kind of even our smaller day-to-day lives. Okay, I'm sure all of us has heard this story at least hundreds of numbers of times, right? The story of the hare and the tortoise. Yep. Now, what happens is, the hare always tries to offend the tortoise because of its very slow speed, isn't it? And after hearing sometimes and getting fed up with all these insults, right, the tortoise says enough is enough, right, now let's settle it out once and forever. And then he invited the hare for a race. Fine. So there was a starting line, there was a finish line, and they both started. After running halfway through, the hare saw that the tortoise has been left behind far long, and he started to take rest before moving forward. In the process of taking rest, he was asleep, right? The tortoise prodded along, saw that he is lying peacefully, sleeping peacefully, and then went ahead and won the race. Now, what is the moral of the story? Slow and steady wins the race. This is the story that we have heard of till now. I am going to put a strategic perspective to this story, right? Now, what happens is, the hare went back, right, and does a SWOT analysis, isn't it? I was supposed to win, but I did not, isn't it? So he did a introspection SWOT analysis and found out that his overconfidence, right, was the reason behind his loss. Correct? So he said, next time, right, it happens that I am not going to stop in between. I will run from start to finish and going to win the race. So he challenged the tortoise for another race. Got it? The tortoise, very confident of the recent win, right, agreed for one more race. So next Sunday they started another race. This time the hare was very careful not to stop, not to slow down. So the moment the race started, he sprinted along, right, till the finishing line and beat the tortoise by miles. What is the moral of the story now? The fast and consistent is always going to beat the slow and steady. The fast and consistent is always going to beat the slow and steady. Now it is the turn of the tortoise to do a SWOT analysis, isn't it? So he said, look, I have been created in such a way that in spite of my best efforts, I cannot run beyond a particular speed. Got it? So the only way, right, I can win, I understand that in the present format of the game, I don't have a chance, right? So I need to have a different set of environment or a different format of the game. He went back to the hare and invited him for a third round. This time he said, the route is going to be different. Fine. So he went back and charted out another route, and on that particular route he explained the route to the hare before the race, and the race began. Now in this new route, what he has done is, the moment the race started, the hare sprinted along, went up to a certain point of time till the time the land was there and there was a river flowing. The destination was on the other side of the river. Okay. So the hare sat there without understanding what to do next. Correct? Along the way, the tortoise prodded along, reached there, saw the hare is sitting over there, jumped into the water, swam across and reached the destination. What is the moral of the story now? If the level playing field, right, or if the rule of the game is not suitable to you, right, you have to change the rule of the game. Correct? Another thing which we use in strategic management is core competency. The tortoise had a core competency, right? By virtue of being an amphibian, it can run both on water as well as land, whereas the hare didn't have that core competency. So he made use of his core competency, changed the rule of the game and won the race. This is what is called competitive advantage in strategic management terms. Correct? Now, by this time, since they have already run the race 3 times together, they had become friends. Correct? Now they say, let's this time don't run against each other. Let's run together. Fine? So they started the race. Till the time the land portion was there, the tortoise the hare put the tortoise on its back and sprinted along. The moment they reached the river, they switched their position. The hare sat on top of the tortoise swam across, and they reached the destination in record time. Moral of the story? Right. Teamwork always pays. Now in teamwork, 1 plus 1 is not 2, it is 11. Got it? So we can use strategy even to our day-to-day working operations, and we can always do a better job if we apply strategic management even in our daily small score, daily life. Now, first question on strategic management: what is the purpose of a business firm? What is the purpose of a business firm? To make profit. Okay. Any other guesses? Economic and social? Both. Okay. Survival and growth. Customer satisfaction, wealth maximization. Okay. Bits and pieces, they are correct to some extent, right? The right answer would be, the purpose of a business firm is to create economic value. Create economic value for all the stakeholders. When you just say profit, we are actually prioritizing only one set of stakeholders, and we are ignoring the rest. Getting it? Now, the stakeholders are a group of people, right, who have got something to do with the firm. Right? So if you can see, you have customers, you have suppliers, you have employees, you have government, you have so local community, you have kind of trade associations, so on and so forth. And the needs of each of these stakeholders are different, and sometimes it is contradictory. Now, how does a manager manages 2 contradictory needs? Isn't it? If you see here, what does the customer want? They want better value for money, right? A great quality product or a service at a very reasonable price. Correct? The suppliers want better value for the suppliers that they make. Getting it? Can you match these 2, kind of divergent needs? Need of a customer and need of a supplier. Can you manage it simultaneously? Very difficult. Isn't it? Your shareholders would always want to have the highest profitability so that they get adequate dividends at regular intervals. Or if the money is retained by the business, then at least their share price appreciates. Right? On the other hand, the local community wants that the business must spend, right, significant amount of money on social responsibilities, which is going to put a dent on the profit that is available to the stockholders. Isn't it? Now, how does a manager balances these 2 things out? Isn't it? In fact, what I am trying to do is, I am trying to give a very different perspective of the business scenario. Get it? A realistic business scenario situation, and we are going to find out how strategy can help us getting out of this tricky situation. Okay? In some companies, they make it very clear, since we have obligations to so many stakeholders, many companies says, let me prioritize that in my mission statement itself. There I have listed down 4 mission statements. First, the stakeholder group is being talked about by DuPont is always the stockholders. It says each of our businesses must deliver financial results superior to those of its leading competitors. That means this business's primary objective is to ensure superior profitability so that the stockholders get benefited. The people who have invested money in the business, right, is our number one priority. And it has been made very clear in the mission statement itself. It says, we consider ourselves successful only if we return to our shareholders a long-term financial rewards comparable to the better performing large industrial companies. On the other hand, Reynolds says, my first priority is the customer. It says, if my customers are happy, satisfied, delighted, got it, they are going to buy more of my products and services, and I will be getting richer, right, by customer satisfaction. So it says, in our relationships with customer, our objective is to offer our products for sale on the basis of competitive price, quality, service, and reliability. Isn't it? I can take an example. This is the pen that was in their folder, made by Reynolds. Do you think if I pay 5 rupees for this pen, I am going to get a value much more than 5 rupees from this pen? Isn't it? It never stops. This flow is smooth. It doesn't crack unless you kind of physically abuse it, isn't it? And it offers me value more than 5 rupee, and that is why I would never mind getting this pen the moment this pen has lived its life, isn't it? And that is how DuPont says in its mission statement. Third, Dow Chemical. It says my primary stakeholder is my employees. How? Employees are the source of Dow's success. We treat them with respect, promote teamwork, and encourage personal freedom and growth. Excellence in performances is sought and rewarded. Excellence in performance is sought and excellence is rewarded. 3M, it says community is the one, my priority stakeholder. How? It will endeavor to be sensitive to public attitudes, social concerns in the workplace, the community, the environment, and within the different political spectrum. The company is going to function and flourish. Right. Now, we have got 4 companies wherein they have got obligations, stated obligations to 4 different stakeholders. Right. Now, in this kind of a situation, now this is a slide which talks about which stakeholder wants what. Which stakeholder wants what. I don't think there is much to discuss over here. We'll move on to the next one. Now the question is the responsibility of the organization towards its stakeholders. Right. As we know, there are divergent groups, stakeholders, and the needs of each of those groups are different. Got it? So we need to be very clear as to which are our number one priority and number one obligation. Does it mean it is a either or kind of a situation? That means if we are responsible for the stockholders, we are ignorant of the needs of the other stakeholders? Not necessarily. In fact, this is where a manager, right, needs to do a balancing act. There can be 2 extremes. Extreme 1 is that the business only works for the stockholders, for the benefit of the stockholders. Other extreme is the social responsibility. So the obligation or responsibility of a business towards its stockholders or the owners is called fiscal responsibility, and the responsibility of the business to others. From that chart, remove that stockholders, rest all is called social responsibility. Right? The trick lies in balancing the two. Right? Can give you an example. Electronic firms, though it is invisible, but they do produce a lot of waste, and those waste are very dangerous. Electronic waste or e-waste, what we call. Correct? The managers of an electronic chip manufacturing company, they were very worried about the kind of adverse impact their business is having on the environment, and they wanted to put certain restrictions on it by indulging into ethical disposal of waste, right? Or once the product has lived its life, taking back that product and disposing it in a way which is not going to damage the environment, and so on and so forth. But that requires investment, that requires money. For example, there is a chemical company. Okay, as a process, the process itself says that okay, these chemicals must be gotten rid of in a stream or something. Now, the moment that chemical goes to the stream, the waters get polluted, right? The aquatic life of the animals living in the water is gone. Anybody who drinks that water gets diseased. Anybody who takes bath there gets a skin disease, and so on and so forth. Now, the Pollution Control Board says, sorry, you cannot release this chemical to the stream like this. You have to have a effluent treatment plant. Right. Now, in order to install a effluent treatment plant, the company requires 50 lakhs of rupees. Getting it? Even in case of non-profit businesses, right? In fact, I was a consultant to a church which runs a hospital. And as we know, churches run the hospitals for philanthropic ground, isn't it? Now, this hospital, right, was struggling with the figures. And when I went over there and discussed it, they says we need to have increased margins. Right. I looked at the mission statement and there was no mention of margins at all. Obviously, in a philanthropic kind of a cause, you cannot have profit or margins or this thing as a mission statement. So I told them, I mean, your mission statement doesn't say anything about how much you are going to charge or whether for every medical procedure you are going to get a margin out of it. Right. And off the record, one of the sisters says, sir, no margin, no mission, forget it. मिशन में हो या ना हो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, लेकिन जब तक मार्जिन नहीं है तब तक ये हॉस्पिटल चल नहीं सकता है. Now this is the state of a philanthropic organization, isn't it? So forget about business organizations. That means what? For every kind of organization, right, financial responsibility or fiscal responsibility is a must. In fact, if you achieve fiscal responsibility, it is easier for you to achieve social responsibility also. Without that, it is not possible at all. Okay, so fiscal responsibility is a prerequisite for social responsibility. A for-profit business must make a profit before it can devote its attention to other concerns. Only if I have got money at my disposal, then only I can think of the societal concerns or concern for the society or for anything else. If I don't have the money, I just cannot even think about it. Simple. Profits provides the cash flow that organizations usually need to address non-financial goals. You know, we talk about triple bottom lines. I'm sure many of you are aware of it, isn't it? Earlier, the only bottom line was profit. Today we say 3 P's, isn't it? Profit, people and planet. Now, can I do anything about people and planet if I don't have a profit? I cannot, isn't it? So, in order to take care of the other 2 P's, I have to get the first P. Simple. It is not either or, but it is both. It is not either fiscal responsibility or social responsibility. It is fiscal responsibility and social responsibility. Profits is the reward for those who serve the society. Correct? Now, how do you create economic value? Economic value added is the spread between a firm's return on invested capital minus its weighted average cost of capital multiplied by the amount of capital invested. Simple. What does it mean? If let's say there is a firm, right, which is making, okay, let me give you an example of 2 firms, firm A and firm B. Firm A, or rather I want you to do the small calculation as to which firm is creating value for its shareholders and which firm is destroying value for the shareholders. Take down a small figure. Firm A, the operating expenses, the operating profit operating profit is 275 crores, tax 75 crores, and the company's capital structure is that they have got 67% of equity and the cost of the equity is 12%, and 33% debt and the cost of debt is 9%. So the weighted average cost works out to be 11%, and the total capital they have is 800 crores. Okay, this is firm A. Firm B, a operating profit of 300 crores, tax 80 crores, 25% equity at 20% cost, and 75% debt at 12% cost, which works out to a weighted average cost of 14%. And the capital they have invested in the business is 2000 crores. Given these inputs, can you briefly tell me which firm is creating value for its shareholders and which firm is destroying value for? Pardon? Firm A is creating value for the shareholders. How? 275 less 70, 75 is 200 crores minus cost of capital 800 into 11%, 88. Correct. So 200 minus 80, 112 crores plus. Second firm, 300 minus 80 is 220, right? Cost of capital 2000 crore, 14% of that is 280. So there is a loss of 60 crores. Getting it? So why this, in the case of second firm, why we call it is destroying shareholders' value? Because, right, the kind of profit it is making is not adequate to cover the cost of the capital. Getting it? That is measured by economic value addition. So whenever we are talking about economic value addition, you must compare the two. So economic value addition is the spread between the return on the investment and the cost of capital. Economic value addition is what is left over a firm after a firm has covered all its factors of production, including operating and overhead expenses, interest, taxes, and fair return on investors. EVA is the ultimate measure of profits because it is the only measure that consists of all the costs associated with the business and not just those normally reported in account statements. And until a business returns a profit that is greater than its cost of capital, it operates at a loss, it doesn't create wealth, it destroys it, in case of our firm B. Now many companies, right, use EVA as a measure of their financial health, and they attribute the success of EVA as a measure of performance by 4 M's. What are the first one? Measurement, right? Unless you measure it, you cannot control it, and that is why EVA is something which gives you a platform wherein we can measure all the performances. Second, motivation. Because EVA is so closely linked to create wealth to its stakeholders, managers are motivated to work for it, because they know that in the absence of adequate EVA, right, the profitability of the firm is going to be weakened, right, and if the profitability weakens, right, it's kind of the overall performance of the firm in the marketplace. Imagine its image, its market share, its employee morale, all those things are going to take a beating, isn't it? So the managers get motivated to ensure that they reach above average level of profitability. Management systems. You have to have a management system that takes care of all the management processes, all the cost, and there is nothing left to chance. There is a system which is at play and everything is going to be measured and monitored because of the system. And mindsets, right? Why mindset? It clearly explains what is what. So you have a mindset from the beginning that, okay, this is what my primary objective is. And once you have that clarity, the chances of your getting lost in the way is minimized. Got it? Now, what is the competitive? Okay. Now, before this, I would like to share with you a result of a research. I'm sure who have studied strategic management, they would understand that there is a very strong link between the market share of the company and the profitability, right? And it always happens that the market leader, right, always enjoys the largest profit margin. Of course, unless you are in a niche segment, right? Niche segment is different, where a particular firm, by virtue of its innovation and differentiation, has created a kind of monopoly. But on the normal circumstances, right, normal business conditions, competitive market situation, the market leader always enjoys the maximum profitability. In fact, there is a study that was carried on, and it was found out that for every 10% increase in market share, your net profit margin increases by 5%. That means, if let's say your current market share of a firm is 20%, and if he is getting a net profit margin of 8%, the moment the market share goes to 30%, the net profit margin goes to 14%. If the market share moves to 40%, the net profit margin goes to 18%. Are you getting it? And it, research has been done, and across the industry this has been found the norm. Okay, why so? Because once your market share increases, right, the firm enjoys economies of scale. For every 10% increase in market share, your net profit margin increases by 5% on an average. Yes, please.
I think the figures will be reversed.
The figures will be? It cannot be. It cannot be. I'll tell you why. It cannot be. I'll tell you why. Let us say 20% and 8% is the present figure. If let's say the firm says moves to 25%, you mean